Let the record reflect we have reconvened with all members present. Rob Catanello is absent excused out of the country, and Bob Landergan is under the weather. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Motion for the regular minutes of October 13th.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Welcome all. We apologize for our special lighting tonight. We had a little trouble with the lights, but it's, I think, better now. In case you didn't notice, we had an election last week, and on the local level, as the Madison Eagle pointed out, we had 4 very strong, active volunteers running to serve this town, and congratulations to Pat Rowe on his re-election and for another 3 years, and to Maureen Byrne, who will be, for the next 2 meetings, sitting on the side, taking it all in, and we're looking forward to swearing you in. Also, John Hoover is in the audience. Thank you for putting your name out there and being ready to serve the borough in another way, and we'll be recognizing Rob Catanello on January 2nd for all his service he has done for the borough of Madison over the last 6 years. And with that, I want to make everyone aware we're going to change the tradition this year and move off of January 1st to accommodate families and give people some extra time. So the reorganization will be Monday, January 2nd at 5 p.m. right here. And it will be the first time in 3 years that you'll actually see a rotation in the seats as Maureen gets to take Pat's seat as a newcomer. A couple other things that have been going on. We had the annual sidewalk art sale that was here in Hartley Dodge a week ago Saturday. Hopefully everyone saw the great pieces of art that were hanging in downtown Madison over the summertime. The artists have donated their services with some beautiful paintings of many of them of Madison scenes. And I think we had a record amount of money raised at the auction. And this is a collaboration with MACA and DDC, and couldn't be possible without the work, and of course, without the work of the artists. And as always, I had a great time serving as the auctioneer. Veterans Day, we recognize that this past Friday at World War I Memorial. I want to thank the Patriotic Celebrations, working along with American Legion and putting together a very meaningful ceremony. It was a good turnout, and with school out that day for the Teachers Convention, it was nice to see some children there. I also want to recognize, as I see Lisa in the audience, the great job that Madison High School did on Wednesday for a Veterans Day recognition. They had parents and grandparents of high school students who were veterans, and they had a keynote speaker from Todd Love. And I would recommend that you look up Todd Love on Google. He is someone in Afghanistan that lost both legs and an arm. And if you asked him, would he do it again, he said, yes, of course I would serve my country without thinking twice. His words were very inspirational, and he is one of our newest Madison residents as he's attending Drew University. This Saturday, the 19th at 9:30 in the morning at the Triangle at Hillcrest and Green Village, we're going to be dedicating that little mini park that was beautifully landscaped by Harry Pignataro of Cardinal Landscaping. Harry donated his design work, materials, and labor, and it will now be dedicated in the memory of Larry Tabor, who everyone knows is a lifelong Madison resident, long-time volunteer in many parts of Madison. His father, a former mayor, and even more, just importantly, he was an avid gardener. So if he were to see this triangle, he'd be very proud that we will name it in his memory. So please join us at 9:30 Saturday morning at the Triangle. The Employee of the Month for November, Amy Greeley of the Construction Department, for her suggestions to improve office procedures, development of a system to track Chatham zoning reviews, and for efficient office assistants, and that's, I think it's second time this year for Amy. Anniversaries month of November. Jimmy, a.k.a. Jet Matina of Electric Department, 30th year on November 24th. So please congratulate Jimmy on 30 years. And I have my notes for the library here somewhere. And then I'm going to come down and do right here. On December 8th in the Chase Room, Madison Public Library, from 1 to 4:30, there'll be a New Jersey Division of Taxation presents small business workshops. So if you dream of owning your own business or a business owner with questions about taxes and employer responsibilities, this is a great workshop for you. Free seminar includes type of business ownership, registering your business, reporting business income, meeting employer responsibilities, understanding sales and use tax. So that is Saturday, December 8th, from 1 to 4:30. And microphone. If you hear that buzzing going on outside the window, often when houses are about to be demolished, the owner will donate them to the fire department for drills. And so right next door, the brick house on Maple Avenue is being cut apart by the fire department. So if you end on time, you'll get to see that in action. So a couple of proclamations. And we have a person that has a major role in recycling, so I will hand it off to him in just a second. But America Recycles Day, November 15th, 2016. Whereas each year the United States generates more than 250 million tons of municipal solid waste, and according to the EPA, our nation has reached an overall recycling rate of approximately 34.5%, which sounds pretty good. Whereas the Borough of Madison recycles over 5,000 tons of materials, and Madison's most recent recycling rate is 46.3%, well above the national average. Whereas Madison recognizes the importance of protecting and preserving our natural resources, adopting conscientious habits that will improve our daily lives and bring about a cleaner, safer, and more sustainable environment. And whereas, although there has been a significant increase in the amount of recycling in Madison to date, we must continue to focus on other initiatives such as waste reduction, composting, reuse of products and materials, and purchasing recycled products. Now, therefore, I, Robert H. Conley, the Mayor of Borough of Madison, on behalf of the governing body, proclaim November 15, 2016 as America Recycles Day and encourage residents to recycle as an environmentally efficient and economical smart habit, just as we're recycling the house next door. Jim, thank you for all your work with recycling. Dennis Salco, please come forward. As much of our proclamations are to raise awareness, and we have been doing this, I think every year I've been here as mayor, and probably before that, and the numbers aren't quite getting better yet, but I think we will continue to raise awareness to work towards that. This is for World Pancreatic Cancer Day, November 17, 2016. Whereas in 2016, estimated 53,000 people in the United States will be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, one of the most deadliest cancers, and only 42,000 will and 42,000 of the 53,000 will die from the disease. Whereas pancreatic cancer surpassed breast cancer to become the third leading cause of cancer death in the United States and is projected to become the second leading cause in 2020. And whereas pancreatic cancer is the only major cancer with a 5-year relative survival rate in the single digits at just 8%. And whereas when symptoms of pancreatic cancer present themselves, it is generally in later stages. and 71% of pancreatic cancer patients die within the first year of their diagnosis. And whereas approximately 1,200 deaths will occur in New Jersey in 2016, and whereas pancreatic cancer is the seventh most common cause of cancer-related death in men and women across the world, and whereas there will be an estimated 420,000 new pancreatic cancer cases diagnosed worldwide in 2020, whereas the good health and well-being of the residents of the Borough of Madison are enhanced as a direct result of increased awareness about pancreatic cancer and research to early detection and causes effective treatments. Now, therefore, I, Robert H. Conley, the Mayor of the Borough of Madison, on behalf of the governing body, hereby proclaim November 17, 2016 as World Pancreatic Cancer Day in the Borough of Madison. Dennis, thank you for coming out, and if you want to say a few words.
Can I? Yes. Mayor, Council, and distinguished guests, on behalf of the Northern New Jersey affiliate of the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, I'd like to thank you for your important contribution to this national fight against pancreatic cancer. I lost my beloved Rosalia to this disease 9 years ago, and my grandfather over 50 years ago. I joined this group to help in this cause, to find a cure. Thank you again for supporting our cause and helping raise awareness about pancreatic cancer. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll do reports for committees, and while we're hoping for the planning board to finish up very quickly, and slow down the pace. So utilities, Mr. Wolkowitz.
Yes, thank you. I will speak slower than usual, which is still not very slow, but anyway. The water department continues its testing for total coliform, E. coli, volatile organic compounds, etc. It is an ongoing and very important testing of our water to ensure that it is safe to drink. They've also been in the process, and I think it's worthwhile mentioning this to remind you all, they've been in the process of winterizing a lot of the facilities we have. So they winterize the ball field houses and drinking fountains, they shut off lawn sprinkler systems, etc. So if you haven't done it, they have, and it must be that time, right? By all means. They also they're up to testing 95% of the 600-plus fire hydrants in the borough, and they found 3 that were not operational, so testing was obviously worthwhile. Those 3 are either being repaired or replaced, and I believe those projects, if not done, will be done very soon. As for the electric department, they were busy transferring new poles and constructed a new junction point at Park Avenue and Loveland Street. They installed some poles on Garfield. They did some street lighting repairs and general mark-out requests. I also have Councilman Lanrigan's report on the finance. Thank you. So the fourth quarter collections went well. There's also a reminder. It reminded me that they didn't go so well for me, but nevertheless, they are going well. And as a reminder, the payments were due on November 10th. All payments received after November 10th are subject to an interest charge. The staff in the tax collector's office did a great job working with the residents, corporations, and mortgage escrow companies, collecting and posting over $10 million in taxes in 8 business days. Tomorrow, the borough will be wiring over $2.659 million to the county, which represents their fourth quarter payment, and will also be wiring $3.228 million to the Board of Education, which represents the November monthly payment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And health, we're missing both Rob and Bob, so I don't think we have a health report. Public safety, Ms. Vitale.
Thank you, Mayor. Report from the police department. On October 16th, The Madison Police Department, along with its partners, the Madison Fire Department and Madison Volunteer Ambulance Corps, hosted its first annual First Responder Appreciation Day. The day was a huge success, and they are already planning improvements for next year's event. The Madison Police Department also hosted a police chaplains class on October 27th and 28th, which was open to other departments in New Jersey. They also hosted a case law update class on October 26th. Detective Paul Papamarcos and Patrolman Ryan Dunn attended the funerals for Iowa police officers Sergeant Anthony Bamino and Officer Justin Martin, who were assassinated while seated in their patrol vehicles responding to a shots fired call. Madison officers traveled to Iowa, courtesy of JetBlue Airlines. Chief Datchison would like to thank the entire governing body and borough administration for their continued support of law enforcement as a whole. We did receive an email from the Iowa Department of Public Safety, which I think I would like to read so that you understand what these two police officers meant to those people in Iowa. Just wanted to express how impressed I was of the two officers that represented the Madison, New Jersey Police Department at the funerals of the Des Moines and Urbandale police officers this past week. Their presence at the funerals were noted and appreciated by the Iowa law enforcement community. It really emphasizes the support and brotherhood of law enforcement agencies across our country. You should be proud of your officers and their representations of the Madison, New Jersey Police Department. Sincerely, Special Agent Craig McCaman, Iowa Department of Public Safety. Our police officers have gone in the past. They've been to, I guess, too many funerals, actually. But, it's a wonderful thing for our people to be involved in a situation like that. Chief Datchison would also like everyone to know that the Attorney General's office will be awarding $550,000 in grants to municipal police departments across New Jersey to buy body-worn cameras. Madison Police Department is in the process of submitting this grant for the purchase of body cameras to be rolled out in 2017. If the grant is not awarded, then the purchase will be part of a 2017 capital budget. And from our fire department, during the month of October, the fire department responded to 18 general alarms, 18 still alarms, 29 investigations, 52 EMS calls, for a total of 117 incidents for the month. 39 fire prevention inspections were conducted, 21 smoke and CO resale inspections were made. October was Fire Prevention Month. All the Madison public and private schools were visited during the month of October, bringing fire safety programs to approximately 2,200 pre-K through 8th students. An additional 400 preschool children were visited at their schools, and numerous tours were given of the fire department. Fire prevention also presented fire safety programs to approximately 100 senior citizens and adults in Madison. This is very important, so please think about getting this checked when you go home. And this will be on our Facebook page. But there's been 2 recall notices. Dehumidifiers made by Medea have been recalled due to serious fire and burn hazards. Kitty has recalled their combination smoke and CO alarms due to alarm failures. And please go to Madison's Facebook page for more details and information regarding those recalls. I'd like to talk about the joint court because it is one of our shared services, so I always like to keep people informed as to what's going on. Our year-to-date revenue through October is $145,420, which is close to our plan. Year-to-date expenditures are 70 to 60% through October. We anticipate running under that budget. The Joint Core Committee will be meeting in December to review the 2017 draft budget and determine what percentage each town will contribute towards the budget. This is probably one of our more successful shared services. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Community Affairs, and thank you for, let the record reflect, Austria has returned from the longer than anticipated planning board meeting, so thank you for giving them a quorum, and now you get to catch up.
Okay, you're welcome, Mayor. From the Senior Center, Madison Senior Center will welcome Richard Cook, Home Ownership Sustainability Coordinator of Morris Habitat for Humanity's Home Support for Seniors Project. He will speak about Habitat's new initiative in assisting seniors to age in place through repairs to infrastructure, safety devices, and energy efficiency. Morris County Habitat was chosen by the National Office to showcase the 3-year Aging in Place initiative. State licensed general contractors will provide the labor using volunteers and staff, and construction supervisors to undertake repairs like correcting code violations, simple water leaks, adding grab bars and handrails and roof repairs. Basic landscaping projects like yard cleanup and sidewalk repairs can also be done. The labor is free. The homeowner pays for purchased materials unless they have been donated. This program offers households meeting age and income eligibility a home repair program targeted at mobility, accessibility, and energy efficiency improvements that enable seniors residents to continue to live in their own homes longer and to be able to maintain their independence. The program begins at 1 o'clock on Wednesday, December 7th, 2016 at the Senior Center. And the seniors also, besides all the programs they have at the center, they also have trips. And their next trip will be November 29th to Museum Mile in New York City. $25 for Madison residents, $30 for non-residents. The bus departs from the Rosedale parking lot at 9 a.m. and returns at 5 p.m. And you can contact the Madison Senior Center for more information. From the Recreation Department, all fall programs have concluded or will conclude within the next 10 days. We served 17 separate programs this fall across 12 fields. We also made extensive use of several Board of Education fields. The rental revenue from 2016 has now exceeded $45,000. We served 19 separate rental groups this year for a total of 475 separate bookings. Our Recreation Ski Club for 5th through 8th graders will again make 6 trips to Mount Peter this winter starting on January 6th. Registration closed November 4th with approximately 175 children currently in the program. And we expect to have around 30 volunteer chaperones again this year. Basketball, wrestling, and hockey have all wrapped up their travel registrations with program enrollment holding steady year over year. Basketball will field 20 girls and boys travel teams in the Jersey Basketball Association this year. Basketball, wrestling, softball, and soccer will all use the Board of Education gyms this winter. The majority of these facility requests have been submitted and approved. Total use of the gyms will exceed 100 hours most weeks this year, or this winter. We were awarded a $5,000 grant toward the CPR AED training for volunteer coaches by the Investors Foundation. We thank them very much for that. And a new AED unit was installed at Dodge Field this fall. Weather permitting, we look to flood the Rosedale ice rink in mid to late December. We will again employ a skate guard for the purpose of rink supervision and maintenance. Our residents are now eligible to participate in the Tri-CAN special needs programs administered by Summit. They offer a wide variety of programs in several neighboring towns. The network includes many local municipalities. We've added a tab to the REC website that includes links and resources related to special needs programming. So that's it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Public Works and Engineering, Mr. Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, from the Public Works Department, the leaf collections for the fall continue. From Engineering, on roads, Cefelli & Sons Construction finished paving Prospect Street, and they are expected to complete signage and striping activities this week. This will successfully complete our 2016 roads program. The 2017 roads program bid documents are being prepared and will be ready for bid in early 2017. The state of New Jersey has confirmed the $90,000 final reimbursement for the Ridgedale Avenue work, and plans and specifications for the Lewanika Way Woodland Road intersection improvements produced for the County of Morris have been forwarded to Madison in anticipation of construction work in 2017. From the sanitary sewer, the North Street Pump Station pre-construction meeting will be scheduled with Rapid Pump and Meter Company this week. The sewer evaluation repair bids were opened last Thursday, and a low bidder has been identified. An award will be discussed at our next meeting in November. For the storm sewers, the Elmer Street storm sewer bid documents are prepared and ready for bid in early 2017. Copies of the plans, specifications, and cost estimates have been forwarded to the County of Morris to determine their level of participation. For buildings, the plans, specifications, and cost estimates finding soil removal site remediation at the rear of Hartley Dodge have been received from our licensed site remediation professional, Roy Redmond. We expect to advertise, bid, award, and construct the improvements this winter. And finally, from the Water Department, Lane Company has been awarded the redevelopment work at Well D, and they expect to complete that work this winter. That's it for me. Thank you
very much. Communications and petitions.
Yes, Mayor, Council received two. A letter received November the 1st from Bruce Galton of Holton Lane regarding long-term capital assets, and a letter received November 2nd from Mary Ann Benninger, the president of Drew University, thanking borough officials and the council for their support during the Black Lives Matter student march held October the 25th.
Thank you. And now we're on to our first two invitations for discussion. This is limited to items that are agenda discussions and any resolutions that are on the have been posted. The ordinances will have hearings, and you can comment on those at that point, and other topics you want to comment on will come up later in the meeting. The invitation or the agenda discussions tonight are Recreation Advisory Committee presentation, a presentation from Urbanomics doing the study in downtown, electric utility rates discussion, and Hartley Dodge Memorial soil remediation. Anyone wishing to comment on any of those topics, please step forward to the lecterns, state your name, your address, write the same on the clipboard, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less if possible. Anyone wishing to be heard? Mike.
Mike Soriano, 230 Woodland Road. I just sort of have a question, and I commented at the last meeting about the rate structure for electric rates. And that was, what is the relationship between our rates for residences, small commercial businesses, and larger industrial businesses? And wondering how long it's been since that actual rate structure has been looked at. I don't know whether Jim or anybody else is familiar with a website called electricitylocal.com, and I don't know how good their information is. But when I looked at that website, it does say that our industrial rates, which are users that use more than 50,000 kilowatt hours a month, are about equal to the New Jersey average for those rates. Our commercial rates, which I assume would be about 6,000 kilowatt hours per month, which would, I guess, be smaller businesses, our Madison rates are about 20% higher than the New Jersey average. And for residences, which are on average about 700 kilowatt hours per month, our rates are approximately 31% higher than the New Jersey average. I don't know whether these numbers are good, bad, or whatever. My only point is, if they were accurate numbers, it would suggest that perhaps our residences and small businesses are being overcharged and our large users are about right. I know there's always been a discussion about whether, in fact, you can make a change in your rates for, say, residential and exclude other parts. My only question is, maybe you can't do that in general, but what happens if you find out that your rates are out of whack in terms of the relationship between those sizes of users? Can you, in fact, change your rates for one or two of the user classes and not change your rates for another class. And so that's, basically it. Another way of looking at whether your rates are correct or not by size of customer is to look at the cost, the concept of the cost to serve a customer. Is it more efficient to serve a larger customer, and how efficient is it versus, say, the average residential customer? And you could take a look at almost a zero-based look at your rates in that respect.
Thank you, Mike. And Jim, if you have any of that, you can address it when you do your presentation. Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to comment on items on the agenda discussion? Seeing none, I close this part of the meeting, and we go to the first agenda discussion, which Recreation Advisory Committee presentation. Austria, you want to introduce this?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Well, the Recreation Committee decided that it was time to look at the T&M 2006 study that was done for both the Board of Education and the Borough on the recreation facilities here in Madison. And so Dave Carver, our chair, distributed the information and has been working on it ever since. And the document you see tonight is an update of that 2006 study with suggested recommendations. And I'll turn it over to Dave now. He wants to make the presentation. And as I said in my agenda recommendation, there's a chance to listen, and then going forward with the budget hearings and everything, discuss how to implement or make changes to how we, how can we improve our fields, and how do we go about doing it.
Cool. Thank you. I'm sorry I'm a little bit slow getting organized here. Thanks for the opportunity. My name is Dave Carver, and I've been the chair of the Recreation Advisory Committee, also known as the RAC by those of us on it, for the last 2 years, working with Zach Ellis and colleagues from across all youth sports. And Jim, if you could advance to the next slide. We wanted to start really 3 things. What is the RAC? Why do we exist? What can you expect from us? Second topic. 10 years ago, you all engaged T&M Associates to do a review, an evaluation of our fields and our assets. I want to talk about what they recommended to be done and what actually got done in the last 10 years. And finally, take a look in the future. What would be our recommendations to focus on over the next decade? What are some quick things we can do, and what will require some more time and energy put together? If you could hit the next slide, please. And first of all, what is the RAC? Well, first of all, there's 17 of us on the RAC, Austria being our council liaison, and Zach Ellis, our rec director, our ex officio, if I get that right. And we represent all of the youth sports programs in town. We're appointed by the council for a 1-year term, and a couple things we do. 1, with Zach, we ensure consistent approaches taken across all sports. Softball and football are very different, but the way we treat and expect of our coaches in terms of the background checks and the training is the same. We also work together for field and gym scheduling. There's never enough time for all the things we want to do, but by working together, we've actually managed to put together a pretty nice way of scheduling and organizing all our time. We also work hard to make sure all the MRC fee collections come in on time and get distributed back to the town. We share best practices. Each of our programs, as I noted, is a bit different, but some things we do work really well and some things not so well. And this gives a chance for the heads of all the different sports programs to share those ideas and learn from each other and give each other advice. We also try to identify and resolve common issues. For instance, we've discovered we all have a common issue is that we have roving bands of adult soccer players who take up residence on the MRC fields whenever nobody is there, or even when we're there. And so again, working with Zach and working actually with the police department, we were able to come up with a solution to kind of deal with that issue. We advocate for facility improvements, what I'm here for tonight, and we also manage fundraising initiatives. While many sports do this themselves, where we have a softball beefsteak, or a junior school car raffle, or the football Super Bowl raffle. Each sport does their own things, but we're also looking for ways we can do it together, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Excuse me a second. There we go. And this is the first time we've had a chance to actually develop a strategic plan. We know that's been a part of the focus of the council over the last couple of years, and we thought it'd be appropriate for us to put this together. And Jim, you can go to the next slide. So one thing about the RAC members, we're willing to give you all a couple hours every month in a meeting. But what I found is the real passion, myself and all my colleagues, is on the field with the kids. Whether we're coaching, whether we're running around, not so much running around anymore, but still coaching, is we all spend a tremendous amount of time with our individual sports programs. And what we realized is the town of Madison has made quite a significant investment in active recreation facilities. We look at it, we've got a little over 43 acres of land put aside for kids to play ball. And we estimated it's got a value probably about $44 million. And the capital planning committee went through all the capital improvements on our fields last year, I think it was, and so we got about $5.9 million of capital improvements on there. So we reckon you've given us a $50 million asset, which is very rare in a small town like this to have that much room available, but we make good use of it, as I'll show you in a moment. And when we look out, I think it's the 30-year capital planning horizon, there's actually $11.1 million sitting in there to continue to manage and upgrade and update all of these facilities in the years ahead. Now, some of that doesn't take place till 2050, so who knows what it'll really cost in 2050, but it's out there on the plan. One of the things we learned from reviewing some of the other information out there is when the Capital Assets Committee went through their interviews with people around town, what they learned that Madison residents and taxpayers have an expectation, go back one slide please, have an expectation for a high level of asset maintenance and service. They appreciate what our town has done to invest in these kind of things, and they expect we manage it and take full advantage of it. You go to the next slide, Jim? So one other thing we've realized is that when we do lots of different fundraising activities, all of our youth programs are continuously making investments in our town facilities. Sometimes it's big. For instance, we put scoreboards on the fields over the last couple of years. Sometimes it's smaller. We buy turf field bases for the fields. Other times it's significant dollars, like the Huddle Club invested $50,000 to put new weight rooms and mirrors into the high school program. So whether it's big or whether it's little, just a handful of my colleagues share some of the things they've done over the last decade, and plus our plans for next year, with Austria's help of taking advantage of the open space dollars, is we've put together $27,000 from all the youth sports programs to represent a 10% down payment on putting bleachers on the field. But we realized that we can't just keep coming back to you and say, give us more money. Because we're in this together. And we have to put some investments in ourselves. And we also spend a pile of money that people just don't see. On coaches, on scholarships, on meals, pregame meals. I think they buy sandwiches for the football players before their games and pallets of Gatorade. We have the softball program. They have pregame dinners at different people's houses. And the different booster clubs and youth sports programs pick up a lot of these bills. But probably people just don't realize how much money is flowing through the hands of volunteers to make sure our kids have a really positive experience in town. Go to the next slide. Oh, actually go back one, Jim. And so what do? We actually go back one slide here. One, there you go, is we keep them busy. In the 15-16 year, altogether, we had just over 4,500 registrations in our sports programs. Now, again, sometimes this is the same kid who plays lacrosse, baseball, and soccer. I don't know how they do it, but some of them do it. So these are the same kids over and over, because you're probably going, wait a second, we only got 2,000 kids in our school system. Where'd all these kids come from? But registrations is how we measure things. And those 4,500 registrations in K1 to 8, if you did the next slide, Jim, what that turns into is a fairly robust high school and junior school, as well as our colleagues at St. Vincent's, kids who compete at higher levels. These are all our alumni. And we're just very proud that we can continue to send kids up into our high school program who know the basics of the game, who've learned, who've competed for years, and have actually worked together for years. I looked at the high school softball varsity team last year. That's what I'm closest to. And the girls on the field there, some of them have been playing together since 3rd grade. And when you play together for 9 years, you know each other really, really well and can play very effectively as a team. Go to the next slide, Jim. So what we did is, before we go back one slide, please, sorry. One of the things we wanted to do, before we looked at the future, we said, well, what does the past hold? And Zach brought this to our attention back in 2006. You all and the Board of Age engaged T&M Associates to take a look at what's out there. What are athletes' fields evaluation, and what is the plan for the next 10 years? So we took a look at this plan and said, how did we do to what we said we were going to do 10 years ago? If you could hit the next slide, Jim. Well, we've had some really nice successes. One of the big key findings was there's not enough. There's grass fields are not enough, and you really should look at finding something to turf and put lights on it. That would go a long way towards freeing up additional time and also freeing up some fields to sit. And the success of the MRC is the biggest item that came out of this plan about 5 years ago. And that's made a really big difference in town. Now, of course, we did sell the Green Village field, so we lost a few fields, but we more than made up from it from the MRC complex, which has made a big difference to all different kind of programs, youth sports programs in town. Second thing is, all right, if you have all these facilities, you better figure out a better way to manage them. Because at that point in time, scheduling was, I don't know, if I remember correctly, a little bit haphazard. You showed up at a field and you hoped you were there and you were the only ones going to show up. Didn't always happen, but there were some conflicts and some problems. And so what we've had is, with the addition of the MRC complex, Zach Ellis, our rec director, has taken on responsibility to schedule all fields. It's a thankless job, but he does it with a smile. And the best thing about it is, I again use my personal experiences. Before I schedule my first of several hundred softball games every spring, I know which days and which times and which fields are mine. And I can be very confident I can schedule on those times and dates with no conflicts. And he does that across all the sports. And he negotiates with all of us so that we each have an equitable amount of time for each of our programs in the appropriate season. And then for some strange reason, I don't know why, but he also took on the responsibility of managing everything with the Board of Ed. And so that when we request gym space and Board of Ed fields, the Board of Ed has a very specific process they like to follow to make that request. It's not an easy one, but having one person do it for all of us makes sure the same realities we have in the gyms on the Board of Ed fields are ours. So two pretty big successes from that plan 10 years ago. Next one is keep people off the fields when they're wet, because you destroy them, quite simply. And we now have much better visibility, or should we say we have much better clarification. If Zach says stay off the fields, we stay off the fields. And again, turf fields allow you to play in all kinds of weather. The softball joke is, well, it's a lousy night, but boy, we can play softball tonight because we're on a turf field, which is kind of good news, but it's also bad news, because it's just not a wet weather sport. But what we can do is, on those nights we know we're not going to play, we pick up the phone to Colleen in soccer and say, stay off the grass fields, the turf field is all yours. And by working together, we kind of take full advantage of this, and we do our best to leave those grass fields alone in the bad weather. One of the key findings of this group was, don't destroy the fields you have by tearing them apart on a rainy day. Go back one slide, Jim, sorry. Last thing here is a rotation plan. Well, we're kind of ad hoc still, because the reality is everybody wants to be on the fields. And so letting a field lay fallow for a time period, it's hard to do. We've been able to do it with the ice skating rink this year, mainly because of all the renovations that have been done to that field. It kind of forced the case. We've been able to do it in some cases ad hoc, but this is a place we still got to do better, is to really let fields kind of take a season off so we don't destroy them. Next slide, Jim. Where have we failed? Made no progress at all. The recommendation was we should teach our maintenance personnel how to manage an athletic field. It's not just cut the grass and off you go. And when we asked, nobody had any records if they had or hadn't attended, and nobody really knew how to answer this question. So we basically don't think anything was done in that area. We recommended that we create a master plan for the Memorial Park site. We went looking for it, haven't found one, so I'm guessing that probably didn't get done also, although maybe it's something we can do on our to-do list if it still makes sense. And then finally, probably the biggest disappointment of all, a big part of that 2006 plan was a detailed analysis of every athletic field in town and a recommendation on how to manage it. I'm not going to do it justice because I'm not much of a landscaper, but between thatching and overseeding and fertilizing and liming, there's a very specific set of requirements because each field's a little bit different composition. And so there's a page for every field in town. It was included in a document we gave you. And pretty much when we asked people, well, we talked to our colleagues at the Board of Ed, and to the gentleman there, he's new. So he wasn't around when this was put together, and he was unaware of it. So it's kind of difficult to put it into practice if you're not aware of it. And we talked to our colleagues at the DPW. They said it comes down to the same thing, Dave, time and money. Because there's never enough time and there's never enough money, so we basically do the bare minimums. So that's an area where we just didn't get the job done at all. Next slide, Jim. So we looked at the past. We said, okay, we've seen what we tried to accomplish, and make no mistake about it. There's some really big accomplishments over the last 10 years in our community, but still some work to be done. So we said, what would we like to be able to sit back in 2026 and say, look how far we've come in the last decade. What would we think would be appropriate? And this is from all the members of the RAC. One is we really think it's time to implement the field management solutions. We have got millions of dollars of fields all over town, and we're doing the bare minimum. So we'd really like to kind of review all that specific field maintenance information with the DPW staff, and also make sure they understand what each sports program needs. A softball field is different than a lacrosse field, it's different than a soccer field. And right now, soccer fields have their challenges because they're going through some changes in ages and changes in field composition, so they have very specific needs they need. We want to make sure the DPW knows it. But what we really want to do is right now, you couldn't tell for sure how much money is being spent to maintain these fields. It's hidden within the general DPW spend. And we'd like to try to figure a way to make this more explicit so one, as council, you can say, we can't afford to spend that much money. That's reality. We have other priorities we have to follow. Or two, you can say, we do need to spend this much money and make choices alongside it. But along that same kind of area, we think it's an opportunity to look at the way we manage the recreation revenues and spend. As Austri noted earlier, Zach has done a wonderful job generating rental fees for our fields when we're not using them. We've got the MRC fees coming in the door, and Jim shared with us a couple of different approaches that could be used to manage recreational revenues and spend within a borough setting. We don't know which is right, but we'd like to evaluate that and come back to you with some suggestions or recommendations on how maybe we change the way we manage our recreational revenues and spend. We're thinking about transitioning the MRC fee of $20 to a general recreation usage fee. Most of the communities in the area do it, and I don't think any of them are $20. And we figure we got people just using grass fields, which eat up a tremendous amount of time and energy of the DPW staff. We think a general recreation usage fee, maybe the time has come to think about putting that into place. We want to make sure our rental fees are always up to date and meet the market requirements. We don't want to be giving away our field time, especially with the lovely fields we do have. And we also want to take that park improvement capital asset plan. You see, the folks in the RAC, we spend hours on these fields. We know what needs to be replaced and what doesn't. And to give that feedback, put as a regular agenda item in our monthly meetings so that Zach can update your capital plan from a parks point of view and recreation, and you always have the latest information. Somebody did a really nice job in 2015 of identifying all the capital improvements and planning out the next 30 years. We just want to make it real and give Zach the opportunity to come to you every year and put the facts in front of you so you can make trade-offs, because that's what it is. It's always trade-offs when it comes to money, is where we spend our capital dollars. There's always going to be roads to be paved, sewers to be fixed, but we also want to make sure that our recreational facilities continue to be top-notch. And we also want to build on the MAF. It's been a tiny group of people for the last couple of years doing the fundraising for the MAF, and we're now looking to every member of the RAC to making a contribution. So it's a much larger group of people, maybe identifying one or two big things a year that we can use to raise money to build into future facilities. Because although we got some nice stuff, we reckon we're not done yet. As our last kind of items, our one is to basically enhance the MRC complex. Want to get the bleachers in there, want to redo that press box, and it's aching for a playground. Someplace to keep the little kids busy while their older brothers and sisters are running around on the field. We also have learned of especially the success of the basketball program. They are basically competing with the high school and the junior school programs for gym space, and there's not enough. And we believe we can make a case over the next decade to find a place to put a multi-use field house somewhere in town. We've been talking to the Board of Ed about possibilities there and recent conversations with our colleagues at the YMCA. Maybe that's another alternative approach to give us some indoor space, because sports doesn't just take place outside. We figure it's good now, it's time to ask for lights on another field, a grass field. It gets dark early in the fall, and just adding another couple hours a night for some of our fall sports would make a difference. And finally, we've recently put, I believe it's one, Zach, you can correct me, 1 or 2 wheelchair swings at our playgrounds. And we know there's a new, really revitalized Parents of Exceptional Children in town with a lot more people, and they're looking to find ways to put ADA assets in all of our playgrounds so these kids can take advantage of everything we're doing. That's kind of our recommendations. It's a wish list. It's not all we want it next year, but it's something we as a RAC want to work towards within kind of this guidance over the next decade, so that we can look back in 2026 or somebody, don't know if I'll still be roaming around, who knows where I'll be in 10 years, but that we've kind of set in place a plan for the next 10 years of our facilities. So in conclusion, what you can get from us, one, is we're going to continue to work together. If you can go back one slide, Jim. We're going to continue to work together to manage our programs and take full advantage of all the active recreation facilities you all have created in this town. We're going to continue to advocate for turning our recommendations into reality. If it's just words on a paper and we follow the wind and we don't do anything about it, why bother? We're going to bother you all on a regular basis. And we'll fundraise as needed, much as we've done for the last 10 years, whether it's big or whether it's little. We know we have to put our skin in the game also. But we think that our recreational facilities are part of what makes Madison a neat place to live, and to keep all these kids busy year-round. You'd be amazed at how many volunteers are really out there doing this from their love of the sport. So thank you all so much. I appreciate your time. Any questions?
Thank you, Dave. Questions for Dave? Pat?
So first, Dave, I want to thank you for the presentation. It was great, and you actually hit on the first thing I wanted to bring up, which is the one thing that's missing from this is actually our biggest asset, which is our volunteers. The amount of hours that people volunteer in this town is phenomenal. I think the next time you do this, it would be a great idea to try to capture those hours on an annual basis, because I think people would be amazed that we're able to run the size rec program that we do with a very dedicated person working part-time, and everything else pretty much being run by parent volunteers or just volunteers of people who've been parents in the past.
Yep.
We need to work on some of the things with the DPW responsible for, and we'll be taking care of that over the next year. And one of the things you did mention, which is how is the DPW money spent, and I think we need to work with Jim to kind of break a little bit of that out so people can actually see how much money is spent on field maintenance every year. Another thing I thought of is you brought up the whole inventory of assets. Frank Russo recently this summer had the interns do a complete inventory assessment for all our roads and graded all of them. And I think maybe having him sit down with you guys and talk about how he did that might be a good way for you guys to do maybe every 3-year inventory of the assets in the state that they're in. And maybe we can get some help with the interns during the summertime to work with your group and our engineering department. And final question is capital improvements. You guys have a list and the current cost estimates that you have? Because I don't know if I saw that in your report.
Actually, it's on your website. I just used that number came right off your 2015 capital improvements plan.
Okay.
Yeah, so that number is yours, actually, not ours.
Okay, so it actually includes...
That includes the turf returfing of the turf fields in, I think, 2029 or something.
No, I'm thinking just the next 3 to 5 years. I'm not looking at the Bruce Walton
okay, gotcha.
long term. I'm just talking about, and this is more not the inventory that already exists, but the improvements that you guys want to promote.
Gotcha. No, that's why this was kind of the first step to put this together.
Okay.
And I know Dutch Holland has been working up some ideas of what a field house might look like, and we've been working with Austria on the bleachers. We have some of those costs we're starting to put together now.
Okay, thank you very much. It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the time.
Any other questions? Dave, thank you. That was very thorough and very helpful as we were planning.
Thank you all for the time. Take care. Thanks, Jim.
Ben, if you want to introduce the presentation on
We'll have
urbanomics.
to reset the podium. So why don't we- Well, while Jim is doing that, I would like to introduce Tina Lund. Tina is the head of a project that you may have heard about in previous meetings, where we're looking to revitalize downtown, and the DDC and Borough are working together on this project. We decided that we needed outside expertise. We needed insights from people who have skills and experiences that go well beyond what we have and are specialists in these various topics that pertain to revitalizing downtown. So what I've done is I wanted to keep you up to date on what's happening. So I've asked Tina to come and give us a brief presentation and tell us what she sees. She hasn't had a lot of time yet in town, but what she sees in this project, and also to tell you about something that'll be forthcoming, and we'll need as many volunteers as possible to participate. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to Tina. It looks like you're still getting queued up. But
Yes, we evidently had a technology failure with email earlier today, but I brought it back up. All right, there we go. Thank you for your forbearance and patience. Good evening. As Ben said, my name is Tina Lund, and I'm a principal at Urbanomics and the project manager for our team's work on the downtown market analysis and strategies. I very much appreciate, Mr. Mayor and distinguished council, you having us here. This evening I've been asked to provide an overview of the project, as well as to present the steps taken so far and to introduce the borough-wide public outreach effort. And that's really one of the key issues at hand tonight. All right, so starting with the team overview. Our work is being led by a steering committee from the Borough of Madison, including the Downtown Development Corp. Urbanomics, my firm, we're specialists in market analysis and economic development, and we're leading the team. We're also joined by our affiliated firms, BFJ Planning, which it's a planning firm, experts in zoning and transportation, as well as Russell Design, who do branding, gateway development, wayfinding, and urban design. Now, our ultimate goal for this project is to provide the borough and DDC with strategies and recommendations that will support and strengthen the downtown, making it a better place for residents, merchants, and shoppers. To do this, we're doing a really comprehensive study with a lot of parts, which must be completed within 90 days of the executed contract. So what I'm going to do is walk through these main steps and the general timeline. First off, in October, we had our kickoff meeting with the steering committee, and we also reviewed the existing plans and studies that were presented to us at that kickoff meeting. We jumped the gun a little bit. We did have our kickoff meeting on October 20th when the contract wasn't executed until the 28th, but there isn't a lot of time to spare, so we wanted to get right at it. In November, our main goals are to do the inventories and market analysis. These include a complete inventory of existing businesses, There are several different lists of businesses located in downtown Madison. Sometimes they're redundant and repetitive. Sometimes there's something new, so we're aggregating all of that, and then we'll do a block-by-block survey to make sure we have everyone accounted for. We're also doing an inventory and mapping of all of the parking in the downtown. And then we're also doing the market analysis, which is an overview of community and the regional economy, and an estimation of unmet existing and future demand in terms of retail, housing, and other commercial uses. In December, that's when we get at our ancillary studies, the things that support any economic development. This includes planning, zoning, and the development context and parking. This is being performed by BFJ. Something I didn't mention before, that BFJ and Russell and Urbanomics were all on the same floor of the same building. I can stand up, look over the cube, and see Susan, who's doing zoning, and turn my head, and I can see Greg, who's working on the wayfinding. So we're there so we can communicate with each other all the time. Along with the zoning review, there's an analysis of the approvals process for new businesses and identification of barriers to development, and a review of the borough zoning regulations and parking policies. And one of the people we're reaching out to for that is Susan Blickstein, to go through the zoning regulations. Also in December is the majority of the work being done for the design, wayfinding, and gateway analysis. Part of this is a wayfinding pilot program review, branding recommendations, and also the baseline of market. We'll create the baseline marketing materials for the downtown for the Chamber of Commerce. Finally, in January, I believe the new day count is January 25th for the final submission of the accepted report. We will be creating that report, going through and identifying interventions and implementation possibilities. We will prioritize these, creating a timeline of short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals, kind of identifying low-hanging fruit in order to get momentum. We'll look at these in terms of estimated costs and funding sources. Obviously, if the money is already there, that kind of puts it in the low-hanging fruit basket. And then we'll have a key findings report. It's a summary of work for each task, the maps and inventory databases, recommendations, and strategies. And these will be presented first in draft form to our steering committee. We'll get their comments, then there will be a public presentation. And then finally, we will take the public comments and fold them in to revise the report into a final document for acceptance. But those are all of the technical portions. Probably the most important aspect of all of this, and this is why I left it to last, is the community and stakeholder engagement. This starts in November, actually this week, and will go all the way through January to the public meeting and presentation. Wednesday and Thursday, we'll be holding 5 different focus groups, 1 for seniors, 2 for residents at large, 1 for merchants, and 1 for a joint council and DDC meeting. We will have one-on-one interviews with stakeholders, and then the public meeting and presentation that I discussed earlier. However, the main thing I want to promote tonight is we will have a universal borough survey that will go live on Thanksgiving weekend. A lot of the focus group information that we receive this week will inform the survey instrument. We'll create it on SurveyMonkey. It will be an online survey. However, we don't want to exclude residents who are not so tech savvy. So we will also have hard copies of the survey available at key venues around the borough, including here at HDM, the Senior Center, the Y, and the library, I believe. And that is it. So I really do encourage everyone to please, please, please fill out the survey. because what you have to tell us will really inform the recommendations for what you want to see happen in downtown Madison. Thank you.
Thank you. Very helpful. Ben?
Yes. Tina, quick question. Do you have any idea how large the survey will be or how long it'll take to complete?
We don't like it to be more than 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay.
That is our hope. And that's the survey we initially design. Often when we present it, more questions will be created, but we try to keep it to 15 to 20 minutes.
Thank you.
And hopefully people will have time in between basting their turkey or watching football games to fill it out, because, you know. Yes.
Pat, you need to grab a microphone.
I know there's a session scheduled on Thursday. What's the Wednesday, the 16th?
Wednesday the 16th, we're having 3 focus groups. There's one for seniors at the Senior Center at 10 a.m. There's one for residents at large at 1:30 here, and another one at 7:30 here. And these were, a call went out for volunteers, and from the volunteers, names were drawn from a hat to come up with 12 attendees for each.
I can't make the Thursday night session for the council. Am I allowed to show up on Wednesday night uninvited?
No, I'm sorry you're not.
Okay.
We find that residents or people are really reticent to share their opinions if someone is there who has an official capacity.
That's fine.
You know, if you want to share your comments in person, I'll be happy to chat with you.
No, I just wanted to hear what people have to say, and unfortunately, I can't make it Thursday.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, people are always aware of the flies on the wall. So, in the report, we won't even give last names.
Could I just ask a question? You're thinking about doing this borough survey on Thanksgiving weekend. How are we getting out this information for you via Rosenet or whatever? Because would anybody know it?
Yes.
To go look at SurveyMonkey. You know.
Yes, there is an announcement. There's already a landing page on Rosenet that Lisa created, and the link will be there. And there will be an announcement, I believe, through the Facebook page and email blasts to various groups announcing that it's there. It will go live on Thanksgiving weekend, but it will stay open probably 3 to 4 weeks, depending on the number of responses we get and how quickly they come in.
Are we using just the borough email, or are we also using the Board of Eds? Okay. Thank you.
Before you go, I'd just like to say one thing to encourage people to participate in this survey. We did a survey in the process of redesigning Rosenet, and the composition of the group and the number of people who answered the survey was pretty good. I believe I can speak for every member of that committee and say if there's anything we would have liked, it would have been even more people to say something. And if you've, I hope, looked at Rosenet since it's been changed, I think you'll agree it's a far improved site, easier to get around. Most of the information you really look for on a Rosenet type site is there and easily accessible. To do the same thing with regards to downtown is to participate in this survey. If you don't, it's like everything else. You gotta be there to make a difference. So by all means, please be there. You will make a difference. Thank you.
Pat?
Yeah, I had one final question in terms of the people we're surveying. Are we going to landlords, merchants, and also asking landlords for people who are potential merchants who decided not to come to Madison to talk to them about why they chose not to open a business here?
Yeah, we're going to do some one-on-one phone calls with some landlords as well as some real estate brokers, commercial real estate brokers, to kind of get at that.
Is there any chance that we can try to reach out to people who actually express any level of interest either through a landlord or a broker after doing some investigation, find out why they chose not to move here?
We can attempt that.
Okay.
I don't know how well we'll be able to track them down and how willing they will be to share their...
People like to talk about concerns.
Okay.
Some of them may be Madison residents who just chose not to open a business here. But I'm always interested in why people felt it wasn't viable to open a business, whether it was an issue with the building, the space, the environment, the regulations, whatever.
Okay.
Parking.
All right. Just make a note of that.
Okay. Well, Tina, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Tina.
your coming out.
It'll be a great product. All right, electric utility rates. Jim, get set up there, and this is a continuing discussion. We also have a ordinance for introduction. We did have a very good discussion 3 weeks ago, and we covered some areas that we were pretty much in agreement, and I think now there's a lot of work in between. Pretty close.
Do you want Jim to start, or how do you want to
Go ahead, Ben. I think you have an opening comment.
do it up for you? And you?
Yep. Ben, you want to cue it up? And
Yeah. All right. You can see we had this well planned. But quite seriously, this is an important topic, and I know it's one that's gotten a lot of attention over the last few years. We are introducing an ordinance, and I would like to start by saying that ordinance represents a very productive compromise among council members who didn't always agree. And I believe it was a fair bargaining arrangement where some gave some and some lost some. And the end result, I'd like to think, is something that our residents will appreciate. The two issues we had to focus on a great deal was when to initiate any changes in electric rates and how to do it. And those may sound simple, but they're anything but. To give a little background, for the last few years, a cut in electric rates has been a recurring topic, and that isn't surprising since rates increased to pay for the higher cost of electricity that the borough incurred several years ago, to be precise, 2007. And we operated with that higher rate structure right up until 2013. The utility generates surplus, and that's been distributed to our residents in the form of borough services. But we also have looked at a utility that is paying less for electricity and really hasn't had any material increase in the size of the utility or its cost structure. So it's a fair question to ask, when will we get a lower rate? The surplus that I just alluded to a moment ago is used in part, as I believe you all know, to make up budget shortfalls and also to support the capital improvement fund. When utility rates spiked, accumulated surplus was being used to partially offset the increase in costs. To put that another way, if we didn't have the money sitting there, rates would have spiked even further for our residents. They weren't high enough as it was. Funds were still being transferred to the municipal budget during that period for operating expenses, but not capital. Basically, we were eating into our surplus rather than generating it. With insufficient funds to address our capital needs, our infrastructure deteriorated, the most noticeable being our roads, but there were plenty of other issues going on that weren't as obvious, but nevertheless as important. When the electric utility returned to a position of generating more substantial surplus, a decision was made by this council to allocate much of that surplus to the municipal budget, basically to catch up on deferred maintenance. As the electric utility began to generate more funds, the possibility of satisfying budget requirements while reducing rates became a real possibility. There were at least two questions that needed to be answered first. How do we calculate how much to distribute, and how, in fact, do we make the distribution? In calculating the size of the adjustment, there is no reason why standard business practices could not be applied to the financial aspects of our utility, something that only now is being done thanks to our CFO, Jim Burnett. Basically, you have to account for all the revenue generated by the utility and subtract from that all the costs. But in addition, there needs to be an appropriation for electric utility capital and a free balance, or you might refer to it as a reserve, to be available for unforeseen events. Calculating utility capital needs was initially done by the Strategic Planning Committee on Utilities, and their work was subsequently validated by an outside consultant who was called in part because there were some disparities and lack of agreement on how much was really needed, and we all felt it was a critical issue, certainly in getting the utility, as I said earlier, to look more like a business. Now we're reasonably confident with the amount of capital we are allocating for the electric utility itself. Calculating the size of the free balance or reserve should be based on a history of how much has been needed annually, but we don't really have that information. So instead, we're going to ballpark it by taking what we think is a safe number, i.e., we won't run through it, and we'll start tracking over time. If indeed it's too much, we'll reduce it, and if it turns out it's too little, obviously we'll have to increase it. To give you some sense of what I'm talking about in a very tangible way, we've had a year like this, which so far, fingers crossed, hasn't had any major weather events. And so to the extent we'd have a surplus sitting there for unforeseen events, it presumably would not be drawn down very much. On the other hand, the year we had Sandy, we had exactly the opposite story. Fortunately, at that time, the electric utility did have some reserves, not so much by plan, but by happenstance. It was a fortuitous thing. So there is volatility, and we do need to track it and over time possibly adjust the size of the reserve. The second question concerns the distribution method. Since we're relying on prudent business practices to give us guidance, a dividend seemed like a straightforward way to do this. In other words, at the end of the year, you'd look back at the year that you just finished, see if indeed there are funds available over and above what's needed to run the utility, put aside money for that reserve I alluded to, and also put aside enough money, an adequate amount for capital. So a dividend coming in after all of that makes some sense. In other words, you've paid for everything you need, you've satisfied the municipal budget requirements by transferring surplus to the municipal budget in the quantity needed, and you still have money left over. That money to be left over looks like a dividend. The problem with it is it's very hard to implement. I don't want to go through it now. It's more technical and not terribly interesting, but take my word for it. We would end up allocating too much money to actually giving back money. And that really it wasn't an appealing option. A permanent rate cut was often mentioned. And the major problem we saw with that is that it's not a real comprehensive solution. What I mean by that is the surplus of the utilities are variable. Some years, the amount of surplus available for redistribution back to our residents may well exceed what that rate cut represents. And other years, it may be that there's insufficient funds and we shouldn't really have cut rates for that particular year. So, in other words, you need to match the variability of surplus with the variability of your payout. Otherwise, you could find yourself in an unfortunate situation. We felt that some combination of a cut in rates, i.e. a very small one, married to a dividend payout might be a nice way to go. So in other words, you'd have a guaranteed cut in rates initially, and then depending again on performance of the utility, you might in fact declare an additional dividend on top of it. The only problem is, however you cut the pie, you're still dealing with a dividend that's very hard to implement. And so that didn't seem appealing. The plan that we would like to adopt, we're calling a performance adjustment. Mr. Burnett will go through this in great detail, but let me just as an introduction say the idea here is similar to a dividend in the sense that you'll determine the size of this allocation after the year is over. So you'll base it on the results of the prior year, and that money, again, will be available after the utility is completely balanced, its budget is completely balanced, and the amount of money needed to balance the municipal budget has been appropriately allocated. So this is, in effect, leftover funds. Right? It's a funny way to look at it, but that's, in a sense, what it is. The way this will work is in good years, i.e. years when there's a sufficient balance, you'll notice on your bill that there'll be a line item showing a reduction in your rate. So you'll see your normal rate, and then below it will be a monetary amount that will be subtracted from your normal rate. Very straightforward, very easy. And again, we would be looking at it 1 year at a time. It will become a part of our budget process. It would have to be, because we need to know, again, how much of the electricity surplus we have to allocate to municipal capital and we have to allocate to municipal operating expenses. I want to, before turning it over to Mr. Burnett, I'd just like to bring up two things. One is that our budget process is very much bottoms up. In other words, we're not starting this exercise by saying how much do we want to give back in electric utility fees to our residents. We're starting this by saying how much surplus do we have and how much do we need to allocate to the municipality and how much do we need to run our electric utility. So this is not starting from the result. The result comes out of the exercise that we normally would go through. So it's a very disciplined, budget-focused exercise. The other thing I want to say is that any performance adjustment will be based entirely on the financial needs of the borough and the performance of the electric utility. Any transfers from other sources of revenue to the electric utility to enable an adjustment in rates would be inconsistent with the intent of this ordinance. I want to make that very clear. I think it's quite important. And so I thank you. I know I spoke for a little while here, but it is important. We want to make sure everyone clearly understands it. And I think now, pardon me, now you'll have a more tangible discussion from Jim where he'll show you exactly how this would transpire.
Thank you, Ben. Good, Jim.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ben. First, I just want to answer Mike's question about a rate analysis. Our good friends down in South River are doing one, and we're going to certainly take advantage of all what they're paying for and look at it for free. When that comes in, we're also going to do a quick analysis. We've taken kind of illustrative customers, and we're looking to get a quick analysis of our comparison on our commercial rates for three rate grades, if you will. And Mike, we had seen that website, and we don't even really have an industrial rate, but it's really backing into just a different type of larger commercial rate. So when people say industrial rate, what does Madison have that's industrial? We really don't, but we have a number of rates, and I'll talk about that very briefly. In any event, thank you for the introduction. Real quick kind of summary, we talked about at the last meeting. This is an analysis of and kind of showing what council is going to get in the future in terms of quarterly financial information on electric cash receipts and electric power purchase costs. This was given at the last council meeting, so I'm not going to dive into it anymore, but I just wanted to kind of bring that to everyone's attention. We'll also go over what's flowing through the meter, our master meter, which is what our major wholesale bill is driven by, and we'll also calculate what our individual meter readers have read every month on everyone's individual meters at home, and those two charts show that. We talked about that at the last council meeting, so I'm not going to go into it. So Ben talked a little bit about the straight dividend issue, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, but it does benefit past performance. It's not permanent. The challenge is that it's extremely hard to administer, and we were seeing some challenges in software expenses and some challenges in even identifying who would get the benefit, i.e. if someone moved out of town halfway through the year, how do you find them? They're only getting a portion of it. Then the person that moved into that home would get the other portion of it, so it was a little bit of a challenge. So with that, we started looking for other solutions. I'm sorry, I flipped one. So with that, we're starting to look for other solutions, and we started talking to our billing software provider who actually has other utilities that offer this performance adjustment as a possible solution. And Ben explained it fabulously. It's a total adjustment that will be based on an annual dollar amount, and that dollar amount will be created and generated based on past financial performance and what council thinks is appropriate to be in excess of what the utility needs. There'll be some sort of free balance or some sort of minimum amount we don't want to drop below, and that is mentioned in the ordinance. This would be done this would actually be an annual action that is taken by council in January, as the ordinance is written, voted via resolution. It would be applied to the electric bills for the next 12 months from February 1st to January 31st of the following year. Administration would calculate, take that dollar amount and convert it into kind of a percent kilowatt hour credit or performance adjustment that would go back on the bill. And that would go on kilowatt hours, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And I'm going to flip to the next slide because that last note I'll talk about in a little bit. So here's my electric bill for the last month. Yes, Ray, I have no balance due. I have paid no delinquent balances. He was busting my chops. That one, the other. I know, Ray busting chops. You wouldn't believe it. Anyway, this is my current bill, and you can see that there's really two main drivers to the bill: how much we consumed, right here, and how much, and then a small service charge. There's no interest because I paid on time. So there's really these two numbers here that add up to $154.24. So this performance adjustment would be another line that would be added to the bill. At least this is what we're proposing, and it would look something like this. It wouldn't show up on your bill in red. I'm just showing it in red to make it a little easier to show. But the performance adjustment would be a percent kilowatt that would be given back on every kilowatt hour that was consumed by that particular customer for that month. And so we'll show the little math here. I was assuming that I get 1.2 cents per kilowatt hour as a performance adjustment. We're talking about that right up there. So the line that you can see here is 765 kilowatt hours, which is my consumption right here. Times that 1.2 cents, I would get $9.18 back on that bill, and my bill would go from $154 would go down to $145. This would happen every month. Residents would see every month this performance adjustment that would be given to them. So I think it's pretty clear and pretty easy. We do need to dive in more into the whole commercial aspect of this, but I'll just show you that a commercial bill is a little bit different. Commercial bill, here's short stories. I love short stories. I don't even know if Barb knows I put her bill up there, but it's public record. So in any event, this is Barb's bill, and she does a good job, keeps her bill down. But in any event, you'll see that she actually, if you calculated, took her consumption and multiplied, it's a lower rate. It's not 19 cents like a residential pays. It's lower. But she's got this other charge here. What's this? Demand charge. And so we take a demand read, which is kind of a current 15-minute increment of the spike in kilowatt hours that are consumed in the 15-minute increment over the 30 days, and say, okay, that's a demand charge. You've heard us talk a lot about these capacity charges that the borough pays in general, $2.5 to $3.5 million that we pay. Peak demand charges is another word that we've used to explain them for those power plants on the 5 hottest days. This is a way that the borough in our rate tariff actually captures that, because it's really basically saying, well, how much did Barb consume and short stories consume kind of in her peak in the month, and the meter tells us that. So you can see in her bill she's paying $246 for kilowatt hour charges. She's paying $110 in demand charges. Under this scenario, her performance adjustment, and I didn't put it on the bill here because I didn't want it to be too confusing, but her performance adjustment would only be on this part of the bill. It wouldn't be on the total amount of the bill. So it's a little bit different in the way it's being treated for a commercial versus a residential. But as we're proposing it, it would be for every rate schedule that we have that has any sort of kilowatt hours associated with it. So the benefits to this approach, Ben talked about it. This is very easy to administer. It's already in the software. We literally put it in, and it will come out on the bill. So that's wonderful. We went from 150 hours of administrative work to an hour of administrative work for Donna and I. It's based on past performance, which is really the concept of the dividend. It's not permanent, which is also the concept of the dividend. It's voted on annually by council via resolution during the budget cycle, does not require extra hearings or a revamp in all of the electric rate classes. It gives flexibility in case the borough experiences better than expected performance or experiences higher than anticipated expenses. A permanent rate cut wouldn't do that. We'd kind of be locked in. And I think it's a good compromise between a rate cut and a lump sum dollar dividend. Also, keep in mind that the only constant is change, and certainly I think our utility will be seeing changes over the years. We're in the process of getting our new commercial meters in, which will measure increment data, and at some point in time, we're going to be going to time of use. So we're going to be changing our rate schedule anyway at some point. It's not going to be in a year. It's probably not going to be in 2 years, but certainly in 3 years, I would say we would be coming back to you saying we've got a good pile of information here. We want to consider going to a time of use rate structure. So with that, this is a great way to kind of give back the excess, recognize that the utility is performing well, and not lock ourselves into something permanent, which might change in a couple years with a new rate structure. So this is the annual budget, which you all have seen, but I want to bring to your attention, we had talked at the last council meeting at the end of October about transmission costs, and there was a question about, councilman thought it was a little curious that the transmission costs that I was projecting were almost completely offsetting the block contracts. There was no magic to that. There was no intention to that, those numbers offsetting each other. It was based on, as I said at the last council meeting, based on what we thought were what our consultants were saying and what we were seeing in the industry. Well, lo and behold, not even a week later, JCP&L submitted a filing with FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, asking for a 53% increase in what they would charge the borough in transmission effective just a couple months in January 2017. That 53% increase is much higher than what I was anticipating 2 years out. I was anticipating 2 years out to be 725. If this happens, hopefully it won't, we're going to challenge it legally, but if it happens, we're seeing this number here that I had originally anticipated of 552 potentially being $270,000 more. So another good reason for the dividend, for the performance adjustment and this type of concept, because things change, consumption changes. We don't know how much we're going to get in collections. So I think that's a really good illustrative reason as to why to go with a structure like this. So that's what administration is advancing, and we've spoken to you all a little bit about it. But I want to see if there are any questions. I do have a couple slides Mr. Rowe had given me. He wanted to kind of dive deeper into the numbers and what have you. My request this evening from an administrative standpoint is consideration of this ordinance, introduction of this ordinance. There can be tweaks to this ordinance. It can be reintroduced. We can have it go to a hearing. But this ordinance here, which is a very simple, 1.5-page ordinance, will basically allow us to do everything that we explained here. Allow us to have this performance adjuster. It explains the free balance of 1.5 million, ties it to the kilowatt hours. February to January, CFO has to give you information before you make that determination and the like. So administration, Ray and I are asking for your consideration to introduce this ordinance. I'm happy to answer any questions regarding that ordinance or anything I've presented here.
So what we'll do right now, before we go to Pat's slide, any particular questions for Jim just on what he presented?
Yeah, in the specific ordinance, the only concern I have is that the original ordinance we got in the packet was for $1 million, which I felt comfortable with in terms of the free balance. It's been increased to $1.5 million. So that's something I'd like to take a harder look at as we go forward. And I assume Matt Jacoby, if we were to introduce it at $1.5 million, but at a subsequent reading wanted to drop it to $1 million, would we have to reintroduce it, or is that?
You'd have to reintroduce. That's a major change. You'd have to reintroduce.
Yeah, so we can have, we'll readdress this. Pat and I spoke earlier, and as I now have my notes in front of me, my memory had 1.5 in my mind. I have 1 million written here. The ordinance reads at least 1 million. So
The ordinance reads $1.5 million now.
Well, the earlier version read at least 1 million. Yeah. So we can have a discussion on that, but let's we'll come back. We'll come back to that.
And then I'm sorry. One more thing I needed, Jim, was and it wasn't until I was looking at the other bill. I'd like to see the cash collections broken down into, I guess there's kind of 4 categories that they go into, or maybe 5, and so that would be the kilowatt hour charges, what they generate, what the demand charges generate, what the service charges generate, and I guess there's interest, which probably isn't significant, but just because it's there. I'm assuming that's easy to get out of the system?
Yep.
Okay, because I suddenly realized that the kilowatt hour number should be the numerator as we do the math on this, not the total.
Not the total amount,
collections,
you're correct.
which would actually benefit residents a bit more.
Well, and I think, Pat, at least the way I was envisioning this was you all would come with a number, and then we would go back, and as you were talking about here, not to bore everyone with the mathematical details of what's the numerator, what's the denominator,
Yeah.
we would back into what we think is the correct. Is it 1.2 cents, as I had on my illustrative bill? Is it 1.4 cents? Is it 3.6 cents? That would be calculated, and we would back into that to try to kind of get close to sticking that number.
And just to reemphasize what I think what Pat just said, and going back to Mike's comment before, that the residents will see a greater impact because they're, as a percent-wise, their total bill, because they're not paying a demand charge, where the commercial are paying a demand charge and will not get a break on that part.
Just a clarification, we can talk about this more and obviously should, but I think we need to set a number for the free balance because it's basically simple arithmetic, and we have to have a number in that line in order to figure out how much surplus we may or may not have to give away.
Can I just make a suggestion that Jim should probably talk to everybody? I mean, we understand what the free balance is, but they may, everybody out there may not understand why that's part of the ordinance. So if you could do that, I think that clarification would be good.
So it's shown here, and basically what it is it's I'll call it a balance sheet item. At the end of the year, how much is left over? How much extra money is there? Then we'll take that dollar amount. Let's say it's $9 million. If we need $7.2 million to go into our municipal budget, and we transfer that at the beginning of the year, what's left over? 9 million minus 7.2.
1.8.
1.8, right? Late, I'm tired, making sure. So thanks, John. 1.8 million. 1.8 million. So that 1.8 million is what we would classify as free balance. So there are some times where we drew it down to almost, and Ben talked about this during kind of the challenging times. We drew it down to almost all the way. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to be in a situation where we only have $62,000 left, or maybe even $263 left. We want to be in a situation where we've got a certain number certain. It's a cushion. It gives us the opportunity, in case of any sort of emergency, hurricane and alike, to be able to have cash ready, and it can't be spent unless council takes action. So I want to be clear on that. We've talked so much about surplus and so much about this and that, and I really hope during the next budget cycle that we focus on the spending side of things, because no matter how much surplus there is, if people think we have all this, we have this extra money here, extra money there. Look, are we spending appropriately or not? And I think that's really going to be key, and I'll drive that home during the budget process. But hopefully I explained what free balance is. If anybody has any questions on that, I'm certainly happy to answer.
Okay. Want to go to, quickly, Pat, you want to go through what your...
Sure, Jim, can you are they attached to yours or is it separate?
Yep.
Okay, I got to look at mine. So I basically just put together two quick scenarios because, again, I always like to see mechanically how this would work. I had given you guys like 7 scenarios last time. I put down to 2.
So thank you.
They focus now more on the numbers that we're going to use to kind of calculate what the I'm calling it a cut. It's a dividend, whatever you want to call it. But the reduction in the cost for the subsequent year would be. And so Jim had given us today some cash collections that I thought were on the low side. So that's scenario 1. And also, based on the conversation with the mayor initially, there was a thought that maybe the free balance went up to $1.5 million. So under that scenario, I tried to look out 4 years, and I kind of made the numbers get grayer as they get further out, because this is just a point in time where we think things are going to go, but in no way, shape, or form is this ever going to happen, because that's not the way the world works. But at any given point in time, you got to take a look out and make sure you're making the right decisions. So this would show, if this held, what the reduction would look like. And again, this is pre me understanding where the cash collections were, and I think it actually gets a little better on a kilowatt hour basis. And if you go to scenario 2, Jim, this is just simple. Oop, there you go. This is the same thing, but we're looking at the cash collections at a higher amount and the free balance at a lower number. So it actually increases the amount of money that the residents would recognize on an annual basis. Jim and I have had conversations about the block contracts. And then if you go to the next slide, it's really, I think this is more important. And these are the things the council's going to have to think about before we set the number. The first is just a throwaway line. The second is the key decisions to be made. Will the council commit to holding the transfer to the municipal budget at $7.2 million per year, at least for the next several years? According to the budget guidelines we were given, we're actually taking more out of the electric utility to run the borough than we should. I'm not saying we would reduce it, but we should at least try to hold the line. The second is, where do we cap the free balance? Is it $1.5 million or $1 million? How are we estimating future cash collections? You can be conservative and pick a lower number, but what's going to end up happening is in subsequent years, as you start to recognize more money like we did this year, and we have over most of the last 8 years, $22.3 million is actually less than we took in any one of the last 8 years. You're just going to see the adjuster kind of move up and down more wildly. And one of the things that I had tried to do when I was looking at just a pure rate cut was something that would be sustainable over at least a 4-year period of time before we had to look at adjusting things. The cost of transmission we have to still get a better handle on. The number that we got back from JCP&L is, I think, their opening bid. We're going to have to fight that aggressively because they're looking to increase that percentage significantly. But I think I put into my scenarios just $800,000. I felt that's more than fair. What's the cost of our wholesale block contracts? And then finally, how do we allocate the savings? We're going to cut it across the board. One of the things that I think both Ben and I have asked Jim to do is take a look at the different ratepayers in the town and how do they compare to the surrounding JCP&L communities. I think that has to go into our thinking because although across the board is simple, I think we need to be fair to people and make sure that they're paying an appropriate rate compared to what our surrounding neighbors are. So if we can do that, plus get that cash collections broken out, Jim, I think we need to sit down, a small group of people, and just drill through these numbers and see between now and, I guess, the beginning of the year, what this would really look like and what the resolution would look like once the ordinance is in place. Again, I've always favored a rate cut. I think it's a little more sure, but I think this is a good compromise because it puts more money back into our people's pockets, and it also gives people who are a little bit more concerned about the fluctuations some sense that it's not going to take a multi-process ordinance to move the rates back to where they need to be to satisfy the needs of the borough.
Yeah, you and I had talked about this. I think it's worth clarifying. When you look at the first key decision about holding the budget at the transfer at $7.2 million, that's for example's sake. I mean, obviously councils going over the budget may well have different priorities than we do. I'm not encouraging to draw this down, but on the other hand, is whether they allocate 7.2 or some bigger number or smaller number is up to them, not up to us. So it's not going to be part of the ordinance.
No.
It's just something we're using as a way to decide and get a better feeling for how this will actually play out.
But it is one of the, it is one of the key numbers we have to plug into the calculation that we make. So it's that, it's the what we're going to estimate as our revenue for the year. It's where you're going to lock the free balance in, and then the rest of the numbers kind of sort themselves out. So that's why those are the key decision points that the council will have to make.
And in the scenarios we ran showed the 7.2, but the ordinance will give the flexibility. But I think
that's again, this is more for each year. You're going to have to make that decision. So
yes,
it's one of those things. I guess, Jim, you're going to have to give us some feedback as we look forward, because this will be done before the budget process really gets underway in earnest.
Correct. I mean, we'll hopefully, as we've had in the past, have a real good handle on capital, which really drives a lot of what the electric utility surplus. But clearly, we need to know what part of operating the utility will be subsidizing, if any.
Yeah, one thing about that, I think we talked about this briefly. I think I don't know if I talked to Ben about this. I think we need to we need to find a way to make capital more uniform, or maybe uniform with a slight adjuster upward, not kind of take everybody's wish list every year and kind of bounce it around, but say, okay, you might have to wait a little bit longer so we can have some certainty. So again, because all this pushes back against what the rate adjuster is going to look like. And again, my goal was always to try to make it as flat as possible, as kind of upward or downward, not have it bounce up and down like the Atlantic Ocean in a storm.
Yeah, I mean, I think I share that bias. The work that the Committee on Capital did, and indeed Bruce Galton reminded us of it, and it was mentioned earlier about his letter to us all. When he did it, i.e. calculated how much capital his committee felt we would need to invest in each year, it was reasonably flat over time, surprisingly so.
Yeah.
And it wasn't fixed to work that way, it just came out.
Yeah.
So I think that made me optimistic that what we've been talking about is something that will just likely come out of this.
Our 5-year plan that we saw before doesn't work because there is that up and down. But we know there's things that can be pushed, and we will work on.
And I think we kind of took the average of it and said in years where we weren't scheduling that much, we kind of hold the money because we end every year with a capital surplus balance, not capital, a capital account balance. So it's not like we drive it to zero every year.
Yeah. The 5-year total was good. How it was spread was not, and so that's easy to manage. I think if we can just take care of number 2 and just because that's I think the big variable on introduction of the ordinance, and if we can get that off the table, then we can introduce the right one, hopefully. So we had a discussion of the 1 versus 1.5 CFO. What would your...
I at the last council meeting, someone said, what do you think about $1 million in free bounce? I thought, okay. And then everybody seemed to kind of drive to that number. I think 1.5 is really the right number, and I ask for that because this is the first year that we're going to be trying to do this, and we're trying to create and estimate and project out how much people are going to be using because it's on a per kilowatt hour basis that this performance adjustment's being given back. So think of it this year. If we have a really hot summer, we're actually going to be giving back more money. If we have a cool summer, we'll be giving back less. So it's a little bit of a challenge to try to work into that number. So I'd like it to be 1.5. That doesn't mean it can't change. It's an ordinance.
So playing devil's advocate on this, since we had the original language of at least 1 versus the language of 1.5, and we're not sure exactly what that number is, and hearing your concern right there, what if it was 1 million, but as we prepare the resolution for 2017, we just plan on a 1.5, and so then we have that cushion going forward. And maybe the 1 million is fine. I hate having to reintroduce ordinances as opposed to address it through resolutions.
So
I would second the mayor's motion.
So the concept of taking 1.5 million is saying at least 1 million. Just
at least 1 million.
Change that line right here, right now,
Yeah.
and go forward in that way.
Is that?
That's fair, 'cause I think,
that's fair.
And, again, we can pick any year what number we want to plug in. There has to be at least $1 million. I think, again, that number is really, and Ben and I were talking about this, that's the number we start the year with, but every day of the year, we're pretty much making money on the electric utility. It's not like we buy electricity for more than we sell it. So it's a surplus that replenishes itself. And if we find that things get really bad, we can always fix it. But,
Yeah.
I think the key here is the notion of adjusting it each year by resolution, because we really don't know whether it should be 1.5 or 1, and I'd like to think we won't find out by driving it to 0. But at any rate, we will over time probably need to tune it a little better.
yeah, $1 million is still a lot of money.
Yep.
I don't think, we look back at this, when it came to Sandy, we weren't just taking money from the electric utility. Money was coming from someplace else. So that's why I said, during the budget process, it'd be nice if we looked at all our surplus accounts so we really understood as a council, how much of a cushion do we have in the case of an emergency?
All right. So we'll change the wording to at least 1 million. And we'll be moving this shortly. Just one other comment, another thought of re-emphasizing, this has already come out as why we're doing it this way, is I think the actual rate structure should not be addressed too often with so many different rate classes, and the fact that once we bring smart meters on board, we're going to be addressing the overall rate structure. And I think smart meters will affect residents in a positive way more than businesses, because they're not home during the day running their air conditioning, but the businesses are running their air conditioning. So it will be another benefit coming forward. So we're getting the right rate structure out there through an annual adjustment, and we'll look at it in a couple of years again. So, and one other comment is that this has been a great example of how government works, that we had a very positive discussion 3 weeks ago, found our common areas, found our areas where we needed to discuss. There was a lot of work in between, and we come up with a good product. So thank you all.
Thank you.
And again, this is ordinance 65, 2016, which will be listed for introduction with the amended wording.
Mayor, just so you know, what is it, the eighth line down on section E, it will say free balance of at least 1 million. I marked it up, I'll put it out on the board right now.
Thank you. Hartley Dodge Memorial Soil Remediation. Ray.
At the rear of the building, the police department used to have an underground fuel tank and gasoline and diesel fuel tanks. And unfortunately, 20 years ago, approximately, a portion of those tanks were removed, but not all of them. And we've uncovered that we have an issue there that we're working cooperatively with the State Department of Environmental Protection, but we're mandated to remove those, which will require us to spend approximately $250,000, which is on the agenda tonight, to basically remove the soil and then install monitoring wells. That work will take place over the winter, and we'll work closely with our neighbors to minimize the inconvenience and to the users of the building, but it's something that we need to do.
Any questions or comments?
Do it.
So that is ordinance 64 listed for introduction. Now we move on to ordinance for hearing. Will the clerk please read the statement?
Okay, ordinance 59, 2016, which is scheduled for hearing, was introduced by title and passed on a first reading at our regular meeting of the council held on Monday, August 8, 2016. Ordinances 62 and 63, 2016, were introduced by title and passed on first reading at a regular meeting of the council held on Thursday, October the 13th, 2016. All were posted and filed according to law, and copies were made available to the general public requesting same.
I call up ordinances for second reading and ask the clerk to read said ordinances by title.
Ordinance 59, 2016, an ordinance of the Borough of Madison authorizing the execution of an intermunicipal agreement establishing the New Jersey Public Power Authority and Municipal Shared Service Energy Authority.
I open the hearing. Anyone wishing to comment on ordinance 59? Seeing none, I close the hearing.
Mayor, I move ordinance 59-2016.
I second that motion.
Council discussion. Roll call vote.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes.
I declare ordinance 59-2016 adopted and finally passed and ask the clerk to publish notice thereof in a newspaper and file the ordinance in accordance with the law.
Ordinance 62, 2016, ordinance of the Borough of Madison appropriating $7,500 from the Municipal Open Space Trust Fund for trail development at the Madison Recreation Center.
I open the hearing for ordinance 62. Anyone wishing to be heard? Seeing none, I close the hearing.
Mayor, I move ordinance 62-2016.
A second.
Any council discussion? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes.
I declare ordinance 62-2016 adopted and finally passed and ask the clerk to publish notice thereof in the newspaper and file the ordinance in accordance with the law.
Ordinance 63, 2016, ordinance of the Borough of Madison appropriating $10,000 from the General Capital Improvement Fund for the purchase of replacement bulletproof vests.
I open the hearing for ordinance 63. Anyone wishing to comment? Seeing none, I close the hearing.
Mayor, I move ordinance 63-2016.
Second.
Roll call, or any discussion? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes.
I declare ordinance 63-2016 adopted and finally passed and ask the clerk to publish notice thereof in the newspaper and file the ordinance in accordance with the law. And now we move on to invitation for discussion. This is when you may comment on any topic. Please step forward, state your name, your address, and try to keep your comments to 3 minutes. Anyone who wishes to be heard? Mike, come on up again.
Mike Soriano, 230 Woodland Road. I think that was a great job on the electric utility. I really like the concept of doing the annual adjustment, and that's great. I also like the idea that you are going to look at the rate structures, obviously. And as part of the rate structures, I don't particularly understand the whole issue of demand charge versus energy charge. I know conceptually why it's there, but I don't know if our customers understand demand charge versus. And is that the right proportion for a customer that has a demand charge and an energy charge? Is that the right proportion in their bill to be charging energy versus parting demand? I just think it would be good for the council to understand everything. The other question I had was the timetable. You said that the adjustment to the bills would go into effect on February 1st through January 31st of the following year. My question is, last year, and I think for a lot of years, the budgets aren't finalized till the middle of March. So how do you, unless I would be really happy if I saw budgets that were completed by the end of the year, which I think is another point. There should be a set process, and I don't understand why it can't be done by the end of the year versus March. But I don't understand how you're going to implement this for February 1st if you haven't approved a budget.
I think a good part of it will happen by, just as you heard from the conversation, is, okay, the free balance will be this amount, and the transfer will be this amount, and that then sets the tone for the budget discussions going forward. The CFO administration will come up with those numbers, and obviously council will say, yes, we're comfortable with the, let's say, $7.2 million transfer, and now, since everything's been put in place, the budget will have to be done based on that assumption.
Well, I hear you, but I'm skeptical.
Okay, yep.
Thank you.
And hence a good reason to do this adjuster, because it's a learning process. Anyone else wishing to comment? Seeing none, I close this part of the meeting. And we go on to introductory ordinances. Will the clerk please read the statement?
The ordinance is scheduled for first reading, have a hearing date set for November the 28th, 2016, will be published in the Madison Eagle, posted on the bulletin board, and made available to members of the public requesting copies.
I call up ordinances for first reading and ask the Borough Clerk to read said ordinances by title.
Ordinance 64, 2016, ordinance of the Borough of Madison appropriating $250,000 from the General Capital Improvement Fund for remediation at the rear of the Hartley Dodge Memorial.
Mr. Mayor, I call up, or I ask for the introduction of Ordinance 64, 2016.
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes.
Ordinance 65, 2016, ordinance of the Borough of Madison amending Chapter 94 of the Borough Code entitled Electric Utility to amend the rules and regulations of the Electric Utility Department and set forth the requirements to establish an annual customer dividend cost adjustment program.
And Jim posted the amended version, so you can just move that.
Amendment.
Mr. Mayor, I move ordinance 65-2016.
I second that motion.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes.
Consent agenda resolutions. Will the clerk please read the statement?
Consent agenda resolutions will be enacted with a single motion. Any resolution requiring expenditure is supported by a certification of availability of funds. Any resolution requiring discussion will be removed from the consent agenda. All resolutions will be reflected in full in the minutes.
Mayor, I move resolutions 310-2016 through resolution 321-2016.
Second.
Any discussion or any need to be pulled? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes.
Okay.
There is no unfinished business. Approval of vouchers.
Okay. Public safety, $29,034.84. Health and public assistance, $9,302.75. Public works and engineering, $145,745.22. Community affairs, $18,373.25. Finance and Borough Clerk, $144,445.64. And utilities, $275,119.50. The total is $622,021.20.
I'll move the vouchers.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes.
And new business. Everyone have a happy Thanksgiving. We'll be back after that. It's hard.
And I move we adjourn. Here we stay. I was
10:04.
I'm going to be in the area. Yeah, one of these days.
All my years I was never
shut it down for a little bit.
Oh, yeah,